Hello everyone, today's poem is Shao Hang Lu, a Shao Wind from the Book of Songs. Last year around this time in June, I came back to mainland China from Hong Kong and stayed in the hotel for a 2 weeks forced quarantine. And now I was in the same city of Zhou and in a 2 weeks forced quarantine in a hotel. You can see the hotel I am staying with, and by the end of this September, I would be in Beijing City, back to my home. Okay, let's get back to this poem. This poem is of some specialty. It also has aroused a lot of arguments toward this poem, what it's about, and how the wordings should be explained. So normally, this poem was considered as a story or a complaining about a lawsuit. And this complaining is by a female to her marriage. And her complaining is about her husband's home. It's not at the same level, the social level or the wealth. So they have a lot of the arguments, and the girl, the bride, or the wife has a lot of the complaints, and finally she went to a lawsuit. But what the lawsuit for, nobody has an idea. What's more, this lawsuit of conflicts doesn't applied to the atmosphere, the styles in the decent wind, because the decent wind is about a very happy and positive feelings which encourage the moral standards and happy life of the Zhou dynasty. And especially this poem was listed in the front in the Shao Wind, which means most probably this poem was written in the early stage of the West Zhou dynasty. And that time was considered as a very prosperous, wealthy, and peaceful time. So the lawsuit, the conflicts doesn't complies to the history record, doesn't complies to the situation in that time, because the history record clearly noted that for the time being there was no lawsuit for quite a long time. All in all, what period or what situation does this poem reflect it? I have no idea, and I don't buy in all the other explanations made in the history. Well, in general speaking, this poem most probably was written about something in the early stage of the Zhou dynasty, and someone said before the Zhou dynasty was founded. That's possible, right? And the second thing is this is about a lawsuit. And the third argument by myself is this is not a lawsuit between a female and a male, between a wife and her husband. It's a lawsuit between two persons. Let's see. At the first glance, this poem is a standard 3-paragraph Shao Wind, but apparently the first paragraph doesn't make a whole paragraph. It only has 3 sentences or one pair of sentences, and the other 2 paragraphs has 3 pair of sentences. So this structure suggests something abnormal, something negative, because we have read some of the 2-paragraph poems. The structure of the 2-paragraphs poems always suggest this poem is something abnormal, and which means something is negative, not correct. So in the ancient time, abnormal in most cases suggest something negative, something bad. And this poem is between the standard 3-paragraphs poems and 2-paragraphs poems. So the situations in this poem is not so bad, but of course it's not something positive. The wording is quite simple. The first paragraph, 益浥路，岂不夙夜，谓行多露. So the jewels along the road is so many and so wet. And is that the reason I don't fulfill my duty? And I had the excuse of the muddy, the wet road with all the dews. So the dews suggest a time frame, a season of autumn. So in most explanations, it explained the dew was happened in the spring times. So this is because they don't carefully study or explore the situation in the Shao state. So you can see in the Book of Songs, whenever they talk about the dews, it's always about the season of autumn. The second thing we can see from the first paragraph is by the word 速夜. So whenever you saw this character, it means the poet or someone who called himself do something 速夜, day and night. It's an implication, or it's something standard saying that the poet, the guy mentioned, is an officer who serves the king of Zhou. So there's a bunch of people who serves the king directly. The officers, the state lord, Zhou. Anyhow, when the state lord was mentioned, the character day and night could never be applied to those state lord. So the character for the state lord is Chao, to come to the central government by seasons, by months, not every day. Only the officers who serving the king could claim themselves who was serving the king day and night. So the first paragraph clearly tells us something very clear. The poet was a senior officer who was serving the king. In other words, he was someone. He was a noble, right? And the second thing is the duels, the muddy, the wet road suggest a very difficult time for this guy, for this poet, and he would be reluctant to serve the king day and night. So there's something behind, because as a normal way, as a normal situation, he should serve the king day and night. And the duel, the muddy road, the wet road, was the excuse he don't serve the king. Okay, the second paragraph. 谁谓雀无角，何以穿我屋? Who said the sparrows has no horns? But the sparrows can stick a hole in my house, which means the sparrows can damage my house. So the sparrow has some of the metaphor or implications here, because the sparrows is the most humble and the most populated birds could sing for the Zhou people. So here, the sparrow also implies the counterpart of the poet was a person with a very low social levels, and but this guy has done some damage to his home. Let's see the second pair of sentences. 谁谓如无家，何以速我狱? Who said that guy doesn't has a home, and why could he can make a lawsuit against me? So the character 如 was normally considered as a female and read as 女, which means female. But in that time in the Book of Songs, in most cases, this character is equivalent to 如, and it means you. So in this poem, we can see two persons showed up. First one, the poet. He was trying to express himself by this poet, right? By this poem, right? And second person is 如, is you. So this is something like finger pointing. He should be outrageous to make this finger pointing, because in that time in the Zhou dynasty, people are so polite. Unless in some of the extreme unnormal situations, they would do finger pointing. They would be outrageous. The first and second pair of sentences actually is an intertext. They explain each other, right? So the first pair of sentences was describing a sparrow damage a house, damage the house of the poet. And the second pair of sentences was finger pointing to someone, the counterpart of the poet. That guy was just like a sparrow, is the lower level people and has no home. So the home in the Book of Songs always refers to the ancestors' temples, which means if that guy doesn't has a home, which means he is sort of the slavery status. He has no name, he has no ancestors, thus he has no ancestors' temples. And in Chinese, 谁谓如无家, you don't have a home, right? But something really strange happened. That low-level people, he behaved like a citizen. he behaved like a noble person. He can make a lawsuit against me. Why? So this is a big question mark. Okay, let's see the third pair of sentence. 虽速我狱，室家不足. So, even you can make a lawsuit against me, but you don't have a home. You are nothing. You have no name at all. So this is the complaining. So this poem is basically complaining, because the poet feels so outrageous. Someone is a nobody, but he can make a lawsuit, because in the Zhou dynasty, it's something like the feudalism, right? The noble persons, a bunch of people is normal people with the rights of a citizen, but it's also a big population of people has no human rights. They have no citizenship, so they cannot behave like a citizen, like a noble, because to make a lawsuit is some of the fundamental rights of the citizens of a noble person. That's why this poet was so outrageous. The third paragraph is almost identical to the second. Let's see. 谁谓鼠无牙，何以穿我墉? Who said the rat has no teeth? But those rats has broken my wall, has made a hole on my wall. So in the third paragraph, the poet paralleled that guy as a rat. So the rat is a dirty animal with a big populations. So this is also implies the counterpart, the other guy, is a lower level people, right? And also that guy has done some of the damages against the poet's home. Okay, the next sentence. 谁谓如无家，何以速我讼? So, who said you don't have a home? But how could you make a lawsuit against me? So basically this is identical to the second paragraph. 狱 means a lawsuit, and the 讼 is also means a lawsuit. Okay, the last sentence. 虽速我讼，亦不从. Even you make a lawsuit against me, I won't buy your lawsuit. I won't follow you. So this poem basically reflected a very strange and very rare situation. A lower level people, maybe even a slave, make a lawsuit against a noble person. Apparently, the lawsuit was in favor of that lower level person or that slave, and the poet, as a noble, was outrageous, and he has the word. Even you have the lawsuit against me, you have won this lawsuit. I won't buy you in. I won't follow you. I won't follow this verdict. So this is a very, very strange and rare situation in the Zhou dynasty. In the Zhou dynasty, whenever you have a lawsuit between different social levels, the senior social level, the noble persons, always win the lawsuit. So that's a very, very strange situation, and actually we have no idea what the real situation behind, the real story behind this point, but this reflected that the stories, the situations in the Zhou dynasty was not always like the history book told us. There was always something different. The life is full of abundance, full of change. Okay, that's for the day. Bye bye.